Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In the past, one of my favorite compact budget gimbals has been from Home as part of their iSteady series, including the V2, and these are really useful, primarily if you are capturing videos, because they can make the footage significantly more stable. Well, now we're taking a look at yet another competitor to that from a company called Bomaker, which we have seen in the past, primarily making wireless headphones, so it's a bit of a curious entry for them, but this is their Smart XR. It retails for around $130, but with coupons often goes on sale for less than $70. 3 axes for the stabilization, so very similar to those models, and again holds up any universal smartphone to make things less resistant to shakes as you are overall shooting. It does come with a few special modes in terms of there's a companion app which can create some auto rotation effects as you're filming. One selling point here is it claims to have an OLED display, which can show you the status it's in, the mode, as well as the battery percentage. It can even charge your smartphone as a power bank of sorts when you're not using the gimbal. So there's an optional secondary feature, has object and face tracking via the app, so it can follow you around and automatically rotate using its motors. And some of the controls here allow you to begin to record video, pan and tilt manually, as well as focus in and out using some of the dials. It's compatible with any phone from a 4-inch to 7.2-inch display, access to some accessories which are inclusive of a soft carrying pouch for carrying the gimbal around, quick start guide, as well as a USB Type-C cable for charging. We obviously have the gimbal itself, which folded up, you can tell is very compact. There's also a free mini tripod, which allows you to further elevate it onto a desk, and it can stand upright while you're filming something, such as follow you around or creating a panoramic shot. You can also use a standard tripod of your own via the typical thread screws, also a lanyard strap. So taking a closer look at the Smart XR, one of the things I will say is it is heavier than the aforementioned iSteady series from Home. In terms of how everything tightens up and then loosens when you are using it is a little bit more complicated in terms of the latches than on the iSteady. It's an area which takes probably an extra 5 to 10 seconds to get you up and running versus on the iSteady. So if you're someone that's constantly folding this down for travel and then taking it out again, this might be just a little bit more convenient, I have to admit. So for instance, one of the things that you have to do is just unhook this and then pull this up, then you're just ready to go. Aside from unlocking the hinge like this, you also have to unlock this particular arm just by applying a bit of pressure to make it loosened, and also this arm here needs to be loosened up. So it's not too bad, but there's just a few more parts and joints there which you have to loosen up. And as far as the build is concerned, it does feel quite solid. It's made of this polycarbonate plastic along with soft touch rubber, which makes it grippy and easy to hold. Buttons all feel pretty tactile and clicky. Zoom controls and focus wheel there on the side, which by the way is a feature missing on the iSteady. So a bit more of controls at your fingertips. There's also the Type-C port there for input and output, standard tripod mount, and then in terms of the top here, just says Smart XR. It holds, again, any smartphone using the soft touch rubber pad, so it prevents the phone from sliding around and prevents it from getting scratched. You just have to release this to pop in the phone, make sure it's centered before you turn the gimbal on, and everything will then become normalized. The motion here feels pretty smooth and responsive, no real issues as far as the fluidity of how the controls are concerned, and it's pretty comfortable to use. So this robotic action, again, is pretty cool. If you haven't seen a gimbal before, it does rotate pretty much the full way around. Now move around my hand, and the phone's camera is still pointing in the same position. So you can imagine if you're walking around, this optical gimbal is basically trying to do the work for you. We can also see it switch into the portrait and horizontal modes there just by clicking that power key once. Now one thing I will say though is on this model, maybe there is a quality defect because the OLED display doesn't seem to be turning on. That is one thing I do have to point out. But again, the unit is simple enough to operate that you don't really need it. And here is the Bomaker app, which is pretty easy to connect once you just have Bluetooth turned on. Just open up the viewfinder, which allows us to then control some of the settings. And the UI here is quite similar to most standard camera controls, where you can then slide left and right, kind of inspired by iOS, in fact, to go through the different modes, which at least do feel quite fast. So I can take a photo, record video, time-lapse footage, and all of the special effects are also located on separate tabs. So it does require a little bit of scrolling to get to. That includes things like inception, the aforementioned Dolly zoom modes. You have to kind of move around to find. But for instance, if I want to set up inception, I can begin this recording, and you can see that the process will start. It will begin to go through this automated controls of slowly zooming around, which can be pretty cool if you're shooting outdoors and just want to add a bit more fun special effects into your footage. This is a trick that's similar to what we saw on the iSteady, including changing the start position, end position of how much it's rotating, and also the duration of number of seconds can also be adjusted. From the camera controls, you can also turn on things like a expert mode, which also tells you the current ISO, a white balance and metering of the camera. We can also use the zoom, for instance, which is a digital zoom in most cases, but you can also kind of magnify your way in and out, and it does feel pretty smooth. I can even change the zoom speed. So if I want to make it faster, now as I'm pressing that dial, it's also move a little bit faster and more quickly. And I have to say, maybe one of my favorite hidden features on here that I didn't expect is that manual focus, which works surprisingly well using this Bluetooth connection. So if you're using this dial, you can change the focus yourself to make it more in focus or less in focus, as you can see there, just by twisting this, which is a feature that I just haven't seen before on any other budget gimbal. And especially if you're more of a pro photographer or pro videographer, I should say, can be really fun to create, making something that is less in focus become more in focus and then gradually fading away. Under the regular mode, you can also tap on these tiny controls here to turn on face tracking or body tracking, and as long as you are selecting kind of a general region on the viewfinder, it will be able to then follow that object around by itself. Generally speaking, the motors will keep up and become kind of a virtual recorder for you. You don't have to be manually keeping things in frame or in focus, which is pretty neat. You can even start and stop a video by using gestures like this finger motion, and doing that will allow it to begin automatically. So for instance, if we do this, we can see that the motion has started. For vloggers, you can also find some beauty filters, the battery percentage remaining on the top left-hand corner. And again, this can be quite useful if you're the only person around, but you still want to be freeing up your hands to do other things or holding up something else while you are recording, which you can then upload, further edit, or share as needed. There's even a quick button to share on TikTok as the default social media app. You can also change that by tapping on share and using a different service that you prefer. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Bomaker Smart XR. As far as a budget gimbal is concerned, I have to say it gets a lot right. For instance, the stabilization still is very impressive, can result in buttery smooth footage like most gimbals, and overall it's pretty well constructed, plus has, again, the manual focus dial, which is something that is quite unique at this price range. So you can check out more details if you're interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.